Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Markers and Monsters. As always, I'm your host, Colin, and happy Friday the 13th! Yes, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that I am a huge fan of the Friday the 13th franchise. I don't know, there's something about it that's just extremely compelling for me, that just is entertaining as all heck, watching these poor teenagers get slaughtered in the woods. Now, one aspect of the Friday the 13th franchise, which we're focusing on today, is the 1989 Nintendo game. Yes, there was a game based on Friday the 13th all those years ago. Now, just a little bit of perspective, 1989, this came out in February of 89, and that means Friday the 13th 1 through 7 had been released to the public. Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, is still on the horizon and won't come out for a couple months. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of Friday fever, as it were, when this Nintendo game comes out. Now, this Nintendo game is notorious for being like one of the worst games ever made, or at least that's what people say. I love it. I think it is absolutely fantastic. And we're going to talk about why here. I'll get into it. But yeah, this game is considered really, really bad. I can kind of see some people's points to it. Just a little backstory on the game here, just so you know what we're talking about. In the game, you play as 6 camp counselors at Camp Crystal Lake, Jason's haunt, and you're in charge of a number of children, and Jason is stalking and killing both you and the kids. So the point of the game is you have this big circular map of the camp with like a lake and woods and various cabins and stuff like that you can access. And you can switch to any of your counselors at any time you want. And wherever they last were on the map, you'll pick it up there. So if you leave a counselor in one cabin, you become another counselor and you're running around and you switch back to that first one, you'll be left in that cabin. At certain points in the game, a timer will go off. And the music changes, and that means Jason is killing children, and you have to race as fast as you can to whichever cabin he's at on the map and fight him. When you're in the cabin, the fighting's kind of like the game Punch-Out, where it's almost kind of like a first-person perspective as opposed to a side-scrolling perspective, and you have to dodge his attacks with his fists or machetes or axes or whatever, and throw rocks at him and beat him up. Now, as you're going around the map, you can find various items like knives to throw at Jason instead of your normal rock attack, or torches or lighters to light the various cabins. And what I think makes this game so great is that there's a definite sense of tension in the game. When that music starts and you have to go rescue your other counselors or kids, it gets very tense, especially if you've not found good weapons at that point. So that can be very tense. I'd also like to point out that while you're moving around, the game switches from day to night. Yeah, day to night cycle in a Nintendo game in 1989. That is super impressive to me. And at night, it actually becomes harder to see enemies. And if you don't have the cabin's fireplaces lit with the lighter that you can find, then you can tend to be screwed. The game gives you a lot of little hints and secrets, and each of the counselors work different. Although I will say that working differently, it just means that 2 of the counselors are just clearly better than everybody else. The counselors have a walking speed, a jumping height, and a rowing speed if you're in the canoe. And instead of mixing and matching them like, oh, one counselor jumps higher, but he runs slower. No, it's whoever runs fastest jumps higher and rows fastest. And same with the slowest. So there's 2 kids that are clearly at the bottom of the pack and 2 kids that are at the top. Part of the fun is actually keeping those top kids alive. And unfortunately here, this little head that Jason's holding is Camp Counselor Chrissy. She's one of the better ones, and he ended up getting her. Now, yeah, the game's a ton of fun. It's very stressful and it's very difficult. And if you want to stick in a game that you can boot up and beat on your first try, like kind of like a modern game will hold your hand the whole way through, this is not the game for you. This game, definitely, if you want to beat it, it requires you to constantly be replaying it and learning new skills and tricks and secrets. And it rewards replayability, which I think is incredibly important for a Nintendo game like that. Games that can, if you know what you're doing and luck is on your side, you can beat a game like this in potentially under an hour. But if you just boot it up, you're going to have hours of playtime trying to figure out all the secrets and learning what does what and who's a better counselor to use and what to do when Jason attacks and planning out strategies and stuff. So I think that lasts very long. Again, the tension in the game is absolutely great. When Jason starts attacking, it gets very, very intense. And no, it's just a great game overall. Now, one thing that is you'll notice here is Jason has very odd colors. Yes, I tried to use the same colors that were used in the game. He's got that weird kind of purple-blue jumpsuit, and his hands and his face are this, I don't even know. They're kind of a weird green color. I don't know. Almost glow-in-the-dark looking. I wish I had glow-in-the-dark markers. I don't know if they make them. But if they do, I wish I had them for this drawing. So yeah, Friday the 13th, the game. What a blast. Now what I tried to do with this drawing is just put in a couple of nice little nods to the game, such as that cabin there in the background, which I'll be coloring in here soon. That's, looks just like one of the cabins that you'll see in the game. The colors of Jason, the fact that he's using a machete, which I don't like the fact that people think Jason has a quote-unquote signature weapon. In all the movies, he uses anything and everything to kill these random teenagers. So I think that the machete's kind of overdone, but he does use it in the game, so I decided to add it in here. Plus, I think it just looked good in the drawing. Pardon me. So as you can see, the sky is kind of one color. There's no clouds, just like in the game. Same with the grass and the lake there. We're going to put just a little bit of detail in the lake, just some shading, or reflection in there. Just a brief glimpse of that. And again, not unlike the graphics from the Nintendo game. Now, one thing I learned actually from watching about how they made the movie Dick Tracy in the 90s was they got that comic book look for the movie by anytime something is a color, everything is that color. So that is, if something's green, it's all the same shade of green. It doesn't matter if it's somebody's hat or pipes on the wall or a car. It's all the same color green. Dick Tracy's trench coat is that banana yellow, but it's anything that's yellow is that same shade of yellow. If you're trying to do kind of a comic book or Nintendo look, as it were, here with this, that's a good thing to use with limited color palettes. In the NES system, that meant that, with Jason, they're like, oh, we're going to make his face, a different color than his body, but they made the face and the hands and the feet all the exact same color. Same with that jumpsuit there, and they just added some detail into it, and the cabins in the back as well. So things like the grass, the sky, all that, it's generally all a solid color rather than colors with all kind of nuance in them, and that's kind of an easy trick to use. Now I did kind of go and make his jumpsuit have a little bit more nuance on it. It was such a big area and a big swatch of color that was clearly the focal point of the piece, the figure of Jason, that I decided to kind of add in just a little bit of color definition or changes here and there. Now the sky kept all one color, and same with the lake and that grass, so it's kind of background elements. They're not nearly as important. But anyway, the inking's coming along here nicely, and keeping it again very simple, very kind of comic book and cartoony. I like that style for things like this, especially when you're kind of aping video games or something like that. It doesn't need to be crazy detailed or anything, just so long as you get your point across to people and they can recognize what it is. I feel that oftentimes works best. So let's ink in Chrissy's face here and Poor Chrissy. She is not having a good summer camp experience, but I don't think anybody that's ever gone to Camp Crystal Lake has. That brings me up to a point. I wonder if Camp Crystal Lake was ever, before it was closed down before the first movie, if it was ever considered like, man, this is a really good summer camp. Before all the children started to be murdered, did this have like 5 stars on Yelp? Or how is Camp Crystal Lake as a camp? I wonder that. I really do. Nowadays, Camp Crystal Lake, the location where they filmed it, is actually a Boy Scout camp out in New Jersey, Camp Nobi Bosco. So that's pretty wild. Imagine if you were in the Scouts and you just had to go to camp and it just happened to be the camp that Friday the 13th was filmed at. That'd be pretty darn wild, I think. But pretty cool, too. I would have dug that when I was, younger and in the Scouts. Pardon me. All right, so let's just add in a little bit of this grass here, and I'm going to use my pens instead of the brush to put in the lines on the cabin and kind of amplify the holes in his hockey mask. I think that's just the easiest way to do. Now for the final touch here, I bust out my ruler, try to figure out how I'm going to measure this thing out, and I just kind of eyeballed it. I just needed some straight lines. One of the famous parts in the NES game is the game over screen. Back in the day, NES games, if your character died or whatever, it would just simply say something like game over or you're done or continue or whatever. But in Friday the 13th, when you and all your friends die, it spells that out. It takes all the ambivalence away from it. Or I'm sorry, ambiguity. It takes all the ambiguity away from it. You and your friends are dead. Game over. There can be no denying what the heck just happened. All right, let's put in just a couple highlights here and take a look at the scan. All right, very cool, very cool. I was thrilled to do this. I'm a huge Friday the 13th fan. I'm glad to be celebrating it. Today I'll probably be watching, let's go with part 6. Why? I don't know, just for the heck of it. But tonight I'm going to watch part 6. All right, guys, that's it for me. Hey, please take a look at all my stuff online, social media, all that kind of fun stuff. Drop me a line. Talk with me. Chat about Friday the 13th. Tell me why you love this game, why you hate this game. If you've never played it, tell me if you want to, etc. All that fun stuff. That's all for me today. Hey, happy Friday the 13th, guys. We'll see you on the next episode of Markers and Monsters.